Yun. Thank you. Maraming salamat. Uh, First of all, last talk for the day. I hope we still have energy, right? My talk is going to about going beyond the spreadsheets, or what I'd like to call open data with care. It's not as technical as some of the presentations. It's mostly about a philosophy of doing, right? What it means to be someone who cares in tech, especially in data, right? So in this presentation, I hope to share with you at least one of three things. The first one is that there's a wealth of valuable civic data trapped in less than optimal formats. And every once in a while, it's very fun to free them. So let's do that. How do we do that? Use Python. Python is great. It has a wonderful ecosystem for building open data pipelines. And third, beyond our technical expertise, I know a lot of us here are developers, data scientists, people who have a lot of, technical prowess. What open data initiatives require more is actually care, right? First, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Ben. You may know me from that guy from BNHR if you follow me online or if you're into the open mapping and open geospatial space. BNHR, it's an independent consultancy that provides professional open data and open geospatial services and support. Right now, I do consulting with the Asian Development Bank. I've done consulting work before with Open Knowledge Foundation, national government agencies in the Philippines, etc. But for this presentation, I'll mostly be wearing my civic literacy initiative hat. I'm also the CTO of CLI. We are an international organization, coincidentally enough, also based in Estonia, with an expertise in data literacy and capacity building. Doon rin kami nagtayo ng international organization namin sa Estonia. Right? So if you want to learn more about what I do, if you're into spatial analytics, sports analytics, I do mapping of basketball every once in a while. You can find me there. Right. But first, let me provide you with a context. Who among you here is familiar with EITI? EITI, very domain specific, I'm sorry. EITI, okay lang yan, is the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Right? It's an international organization, a nonprofit, that promotes the open and sustainable and accountable management of extractives data. And wouldn't you know it, the Philippines is actually one of its implementing countries. I think since 2015, 14, the Philippine government and the companies, the extractive industries in the Philippines have been releasing their data in what's called the EITI standard. And that standard is considered the global benchmark for transparency and accountability in the mining, in this industrial, oil and gas sectors. It provides a framework for disclosure and multi-stakeholder oversight. Very important, the oversight part is very important because you don't want your data to just be, the government says this is the data, so we must believe it. Or, hey, the company says this is our revenue, just believe us. Right? There has to be multi-stakeholder oversight so that you can trust the data in a way. In fact, requirement 7.2 of the standard is about data accessibility and open data. Right? They do that using summary data templates. Okay? This is just a tool for them to collect and publish the data. These are just spreadsheets and Excel file. But it is a gold mine, pardon the pun, of so much information, government agencies, companies, projects, revenues, etc. So imagine if you are a data journalist. You're trying to look at, hey, in the Philippines, how much revenue has this specific company gotten over the past 10 years? How much payment to the government has they done? Maybe you're a data scientist. You're trying to look at the trends in oil, gas, in minerals, over Southeast Asia, over the Asia Pacific. The data is here. The data is just here. Unfortunately, and this is where we come in, the problem that we had was, or the problem that EITI asked us to answer was, how do you best share this data? The data is there. The data is always there. It's just sometimes they're really hard to find or they're really hard to work with. Okay? So when it comes to sharing data, there's so many considerations. In our case, we just focused on 4. The complexity of the platform. How easy it is to deploy something and for EITI to manage it. Right? We don't want, in the work that I do, I always say, a simple tool that everybody can use is better than a complex one that only a few can master. That is what we try to do in any kind of development that we do. The second is the commitment needed. The project itself was mostly a proof of concept, so we did not want something that would require too much budget, too much time. Third one is the accessibility of the data. Right? Again, this is such a rich data set that we want different stakeholders to easily share and download it. We don't want something so complex or different wherein the user experience is bad for one stakeholder just to make it easier for another one. We try to strike a balance on that so that they can also be more reusable, right? This is a very multi-stakeholder data. It's not just data scientists who use it, it's not just data journalists, even people from the financial sector use this data a lot. So we want to make sure that it's also reusable with other data sets in the field. For example, if you're not familiar, there's what's called the beneficial ownership data standard. It's a data standard by open ownership that shows you who is the actual beneficial owner of a company. Because a shell company could have the name A as its owner, but in reality, it's a shell company of big company X, whose actual owner and beneficial owner is CD, A, B, C, X, Y, whoever. So we want to be able to make sure that the data here is also reusable with other standards, especially in the open data field. Right? So what were the common choices we had? We wanted to look at open data portals, right? High complexity, high commitment, but also high accessibility and reusability. Things like SICAN or DECAN, for those of you who work in the open data portal field. Right? We also said, hey, what about just sharing it on GitHub? A lot of people do this, right? Low complexity, low commitment. The infrastructure is already there. All you need to do is upload your files there, upload your CSVs, etc. Although what we found was accessibility and reusability wasn't up to the requirement that we want. Unfortunately, like I said, as a very multi-stakeholder data set, not everyone who's going to use that data is going to know how to use GitHub. A lot of us here, probably maybe 99% of us here know how to use GitHub, but that's not the audience of the data that we had. So scratch that. How about just sharing it as files, right? Setting up a Google Drive, an S3 bucket on Amazon, an Azure blob, whatever. Just put it all on the net, make sure people can access it. Low to moderate complexity, you have high accessibility, but then the reusability becomes difficult again. Biggest example, if I'm an analyst, data journalist, data scientist, I want to check the trend of revenues in all countries of the world for the past 5 years. That would require me to then download all of the data individually, apply my own cleaning to the data, and then do the analysis after. Imagine the amount of time that you've wasted because you save the data as individual files. Right? So the ask was very simple. That was the problem. The ask was very simple. An easy to use, cost-effective solution that allows EITI not just to share the data, but it enables users to download, view, query directly or through an API, which is very important, and also integrate with other data sets. If you notice, this ask allows us to answer all of those 4 questions or 4 of those 4 considerations that we had. Complexity, commitment, accessibility, and reusability. Which brings me to the solution. Bilis na. You can scan that QR code that will lead you to the state-owned enterprises dataset instance that we deployed for EITI. So the solution for the database and API is a dataset instance. I will talk more about dataset later on, which hosts the EITI summary data. And it serves as an open data platform, allowing users to do whatever they want with the data via the website or API. If if you've been, if you've ever wanted data, if you've ever wanted to share data, you didn't know how to, and you want, you want to start, dataset is such an amazing option. So just some screenshots. Again, you can browse it yourself. This is the deployment that we did. It's essentially a database of state-owned enterprises. It's just a SQLite database. That's what's amazing. No need for a server, no need for a backend. It's a SQLite database with essentially an interface on top. Allows you to do simple queries and facets, but it also allows you to directly interface and interact with the data with SQL. So if you're, regardless if you're a beginner in the data field, you just want to download the data, or you're advanced and you know SQL, etc., this will work for you equally well, right? We have all of the data sets there in their summary data tables, and one of the biggest things that that's the advantage of this was that everything is accessible also via a very simple API. Whether you need it as a JSON, for those of us who prefer object notation and nested formats, but for those who prefer to work more with tabular data, it's also available as a CSV. So we're not, we don't have any biases of who should know what kind of format, tabular or object notation, people should want, depending on what they want. It's available without needing to set up. The moment you deploy a dataset, the API is set up. And the API is just, everything is just a JSON API. It's just a URL. You edit the URL, it also actually edits the data that you want. So all the queries that you can do directly on the website, they're all just URL endpoints, right? So that was the solution. Simple enough, yes. But what I forgot to mention is we had to clean and standardize the data first, right? So that was the first part. I wanted to show you that there's EITI is just one example of the civic data that's available out there that probably some people are not aware of, that we can help people become more aware of, and of course we can help them share the data. Second part is, in order to come from the spreadsheet to that EITI dataset or database, we need to clean and standardize the data. And here is where my second point comes in. Python has an amazing ecosystem to do this, right? In our pipeline, we use Python in almost everything. Again, we have multiple spreadsheets that we want to tidy up and standardize into a consolidated spreadsheet so that all of the data, agencies, companies, projects will be in just one file. That makes it easier to break it up later on. So for that, we use Python. We also use PyXLS, etc. And then after technically tidying it up, we clean it more with Jupyter and the typical Python data stack, pandas, right, NumPy, etc. We do two basic things. We check for red flags. Is it complete? Is it correct? Is there duplication? And also, we want to generate what we call ideal and actual data tables. Because later on, I will show you that all of our expectations were broken in this project. So we clean the data. I also build simple interfaces for our client-facing applications, because if you have the data but you can't show them how it's useful, then it doesn't really work that way. So we built some very simple interfaces to show them, like this is the country revenue explorer, wherein you can just select a country, then it shows you the information from the existing database, right? So something simple that someone from EITI or even a data user can appreciate, right? So again, the audience isn't purely technical people. Your audience is a wide variety of people. So always keep that in mind. And of course, the pièce de résistance or dataset instance. So we deploy the highly customized instance that allows them to edit the data, upload CSVs later on, And we used a lot of tools and other libraries, such as SQLite tools. And like I said, I'll talk more about dataset. So what it is, you can find it on dataset.io. It's a tool for publishing and exploring data. Again, it's integrated into this wonderful website plus API directly. You deploy dataset, you have both of those. And the magic happens because it's just essentially an interface to a SQLite database. You have all of your data on a SQLite database. Dataset will read that database, and it already knows what to do with it. You know that it's good because it's also built by the co-creator of Django, Simon Willison. In fact, when we were doing this for EITI, we had some conversations and consultations with Simon, asking him if this is the kind of use case where dataset can thrive, right? One of the things that we did that was not the common dataset workflow is we did a lot more heavy front-end styling for the UI and UX. Because if you go to dataset.io, when you look at the examples, it's very leaning towards someone who has some technical knowledge. But again, our audience isn't that. So a lot of the work also came into skinning dataset so that it will be something that someone who's not heavy into data will appreciate. Some of the features that was important for us, again, filters and facets, custom queries, exporting and API to everything. And like I said, everything is just a URL. Change the URL, you change the response of the data that you're going to get. Right? So my example earlier, if I'm a data journalist or data analyst wanting to analyze all of the revenues for the past 10 years, it's just one URL endpoint away versus downloading all the data and doing all the cleaning. Right? So that's the second one. Like I said, Python is an amazing ecosystem. Beyond doing work for big multinational companies, it also is an amazing tool for the civic sector. Right? So if you're into civic tech, etc., there's a lot of opportunities there. If you know Dev, you know Python. So lastly, what do you mean by care? Right? First of all, I think we all know this. If you've ever worked with data before, you know that it's at least 80% of the work. And imagine that's just data from one source. Imagine trying to clean data from multiple data sources. EITI, like I said, is a membership organization of 50+ countries. They are not the ones creating the data. They are a data curator and data repository. The ones who are actually creating the data are these countries. And you can imagine that different countries have different levels of literacy when it comes to data. Some of them would fill up data on the spreadsheet quite well. Some of them may not. So common issues we've encountered, spelling mistakes, right? Sometimes they misspell the names of their countries. Some of them use placeholder values. Instead of deleting the data on the cell, they just leave insert value here. Imagine trying to analyze the revenue, which is numerical, and somewhere there, just one cell has insert value here, right? And a lot of formatting errors as well, right? Extra white spaces before, after the value. As humans, that's something that we can easily digest. But a typical computer, if it sees a white space after, those two are totally different, right? So a lot of problems when it comes to formatting. Second, cleaning doesn't stop when the data is tidy, right? We might think that, hey, after I've tidied up my data, then that means I'm good, right? I can use this. Not really, right? For us, we did this process wherein we wanted to verify the data after cleaning and also validate it. Verification for us meant, is the data correct by virtue of its nature? Is it complete? Are there no duplicates? Is it consistent? And validation meant, is it actually useful? Right? Is this something that can be used in analysis and visualization? Because it could be tidy, but it could be useless as well. So careful cleaning and validation for us meant having assumptions about the data, asking the data about those assumptions, filtering the data to find those subsets of the data that meet the assumptions and answer those questions, and then validating it by modifying the content so that we enable analysis and visualization. And this is not a one-time process. This is iterative for us, right? Which required intimate understanding and context of the data, right? So this is just our simplified data model and expectations. There's an agency accompanying the project. The project provides revenue to the company pays fees to the agency. So simple expectations, all of them must have a unique ID. The revenue from the project should equal the revenues of the companies. Basic. Revenue of an agency equals payments from the companies. Right. That's the conceptual idea. The reality is they're stored in these tables in a spreadsheet. And aside from those expectations from the simplified data model, because of the way that the data was structured initially, we also have to make sure that there's consistency in entities in part 3 that are present in part 4 and 5 and vice versa. Because it doesn't make sense if there's an organization that pays to an agency, but on another tab, that organization doesn't exist at all, right? How can that happen? Other expectations for us included a lot about, again, duplication, consistency, correctness. That was the expectations. In reality, good luck. So doing some very simple, as just a very simple duplication analysis, we found like multiple duplicates, inconsistent names, etc., etc. So imagine as someone doing data work. Nakakaiyak. Yes. I cried several tears when I saw this, when I was doing this. So that leads me to my last point when it comes to caring. You have to be intentional and you have to be deliberate, right? We know that the data wasn't as clean as we wanted. So that meant we had to be very focused on what we wanted to achieve, right? We couldn't be arbitrary. We couldn't just, hey, let's feed it to an LLM and bahala na, whatever it spits out, we'll check. We had to be very intentional. We had to be very deliberate. We had to be very careful, right? If you care about something, if you care about someone, right, you're very intentional with them. You're very deliberate with what you do, right? You don't want them to misunderstand you. In the same way, we don't want to misunderstand the data, right? That's why we say that we care about the data. So for us, that meant again following our approach. We build assumptions, we build questions, we filter the data, and then we do analysis. In terms of completeness, we want to make sure that the data is fit for the database that we're building, right? Assumptions, the data shouldn't contain blanks. Questions we ask, does it actually contain blank rows? Does it contain errors? And then we filter it. What are the subsets that agree or meet the criteria? What are those that do not? And then we perform an analysis of those subsets. And then on the outcomes, we provide steps that can be done. Same with duplication and coherency. We have some assumptions wherein for two elements or entities to be the same, there must be some unique combination that makes the two of them unique, right? So we ask those questions, we filter, we analyze, and then we provide outcomes. And for us, that's very important. Actionable outcomes or actionable findings, right? Like I said, it's not about being arbitrary, it's about being deliberate. So if there are null values, this was the recommendation. If there are suspicious values, artifacts and duplicates, like my examples, we built a very simple heuristic that enabled us to identify and flag which are possible duplicates. So to tell the client, hey, you may want to try to review these files because they had a lot of mistakes in them. Similar to like full data sets, we provide a quality score for each spreadsheet. That allows us then to tell EITI, you may want to improve the data collection for this country, or you may want to analyze or look back and check the data collection for this year. And a lot of formatting inconsistencies, like I said, we provide as much as possible actionable insight and solutions for our client, right? And that's what data cleaning and open data with care is. What's next? We're trying to look at making the pipeline more, faster, more sustainable in the future. For example, although we use pandas a lot, because that's what I was used to, been slowly looking at polars as a way to speed up the process, and also for more web-heavy stuff. So we're trying to not change the caring part, but just change the part that makes it easier for us to care, right? And that is all. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much. You can find me online in all those places, and if you have questions, I'm here until sabihin nilang time na.
Ask ko lang po, yung sa last point nyo kasi is yung for faster
Yes.
Panda. Have you used QDF?
Sige. I have not yet. I've only taken a look at polars, but I will put that into consideration. Thank you very much.